Hey, welcome to the video. In this video, we are going to be looking at 10 gross science facts. So, be prepared to be amazed, be prepared to hear all kinds of incredible science facts, but most importantly, be prepared to be grossed out just a little bit as you learn all about 10 gross but amazing science facts. Okay, so our first amazing but gross science fact is all about astronauts. And it's the fact that astronauts, believe it or not, cannot burp in space. They can try to burp in space, but the outcome might not be very pleasant. So, let's think about what happens when we eat food normally. We eat food, we have something to drink, and it all goes down into our mouth and down our throat and into our stomach. Now, gravity on Earth separates everything out. The food and the liquid that we eat and drink has a high density, so gravity pulls it down to the bottom of our stomach. And as we digest that food, gas is released. And because gas is a very low density, gas floats up. And we feel a sensation in our stomach and we feel all those bubbles and we let out a burp. And it's quite satisfying and it's quite nice and we're all really happy about it. Pretty normal. However, if you try doing this in space, because there's no gravity, the density of the gas or the solids in our stomach make no difference. There's no gravity, so the less dense stuff, the gas, doesn't float to the top of our stomach. The more dense stuff, the food and the liquid that we drink, doesn't sink to the bottom of our stomach. So when we try to burp in space, everything's mixed up. It's all mixed up because there's no gravity separating it out. And when we try to burp, because it's all mixed up, everything comes up at once. Disgusting. But it's even worse because it's in space. So you're not only throwing up into your mouth because everything's mixed up when you try to burp, but if any of it gets out, it's going to float all over your spacecraft. Not a nice thing to clean up. So, astronauts, believe it or not, do not try and burp in space because it is gross for them. For our second fact, we are going to stick to the topic of burping because who doesn't like a good burp? But this time we're not going to look at astronauts burping, we're going to look at cows burping. Now, cows, you might not think they burp that much. Unfortunately, they are pretty gross animals. They burp up to 500 litres of a gas called methane every single day. Now, methane is the same gas that comes out of you when you fart. Now, methane, believe it or not, is actually an odourless and colourless gas. So I'm going to leave it up to you to work out why it smells so much when it comes out of your backside. But methane, cows burp an absolute massive amount of it. As we said, 500 litres of it every single day. Now, this is actually quite problematic. As well as being disgusting, methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. This means it traps lots and lots of heat from the sun and contributes to global warming. In fact, it's more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to causing global warming. The good news is methane doesn't stay in the atmosphere for quite as long as carbon dioxide does. So, our next amazing fact, I'm afraid, is going to get pretty gross. And we're going to be looking at mucus. Yup, that green, nasty snot that we produce all the time. In fact, believe it or not, we produce 7 litres of mucus every single week. Yup, that's 1 litre of mucus every single day. That is a lot of mucus. Now that in itself is gross. It is disgusting. But in reality, mucus is a really useful substance. And the reason it's so useful is because, well, we're obviously constantly breathing in. And as we breathe in, we're breathing in bacteria, and we're breathing in dirt and dust and all other kinds of nasty stuff. Now what the mucus does is it traps all of that bacteria and all of that nasty stuff, and it prevents us from getting in to our lungs. So the dirt cannot get into our lungs. So it's essentially keeping our lungs nice and clean. However, that mucus has got to go somewhere. Now it's produced in our nose and it drips down the back of our throat, because in our nasal passage and in our throat there are these tiny little hairs on our throat called cilia, and they move in a wave-like function and they brush that mucus down our throat. Now where does that mucus go when it's in the back of our throat? Well, of course, we swallow it, and we swallow it into our stomach. So every single day, we're swallowing 1 litre of mucus. Every week, we're swallowing 7 litres of mucus, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's constantly going from your nasal passage down into your stomach. Delicious. So, if you're already gagging at the thought that you swallow 7 litres of mucus every single day, well, I want you to spare a thought for lobsters, because they're the subject of our next gross but amazing science fact. Now, lobsters already have got a bit of a problem. They're not the prettiest of animals, they're not very cute and cuddly. In fact, they're pretty much close to some of the ugliest creatures in the sea, although I'm sure some people love lobsters. But it gets so much worse for them. And this is because lobsters, believe it or not, pee out of their faces. Yep, that's right, lobsters pee out of their faces. Lobsters have got a little opening under their eyes called nephrophores. And this is where pee comes out if you're a lobster, which is pretty gross in itself. But I hate to say it, little lobsters, but it gets worse for them. It gets even more gross. And this is because lobsters actually use this pee to communicate. So if 2 lobsters are having a fight, they're going to communicate with each other while fighting by peeing over each other's faces. Gross. But if you're a female lobster and you want to get the attention of a male lobster because you want to mate, you might pee all over where that male lobster lives. Or you might pee on his face to tell him that you want to mate, to start initiating that mating. Such romantic creatures. Gross. Okay, I think we need to move away from the toilet habits of a lobster, because frankly, that's too disgusting even for me. But the toilet habits of humans aren't much better. Now, we all go to the toilet. It's a fact of life. You can't help it. Some of us are pretty gross because we don't flush the toilet. But it turns out they might not be the truly gross ones after all. Sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? But when you go to the toilet and you flush that toilet, what you're doing is you're putting a load of water into that toilet bowl. And what happens when you put a load of water into that toilet bowl? Well, spray flies up everywhere. And it flies up everywhere all over the bathroom. These tiny little droplets of water from the toilet. Except when you flush the toilet, there aren't just droplets of water in there. There's droplets of your wee and your poo, and it's flying all over the bathroom. In fact, it can fly up to about 6 feet away from the toilet. So about 2 meters away. That's pretty far. And of course, when you flush, you're within 2 meters of the toilet. So all those droplets are going all over you. But it gets worse. It gets so much worse. If you go to your bathroom and you look at where your toothbrush is, I absolutely guarantee you your toothbrush is within 2 meters of your toilet. So every single time you flush that toilet, there are droplets of water that contain all the germs and the bugs and the bacteria that are in that toilet bowl, and they're spraying all over your bathroom, and they're landing on your toothbrush. And they're doing that all day long, every single day. And then what do you do in the evening? Of course, you brush your teeth. You brush your teeth that have had all those droplets from the toilet splashing all over it. Pretty gross. However, there is a very easy solution that everyone can do. You put the lid down and it stops the droplets flying everywhere. But if you don't, yeah, ooh. I really hope that you're enjoying these 10 gross facts about science. And I hope you're finding them interesting and educational. Now, if you want to learn more about science, perhaps in a slightly more sensible way, then why don't you check out our website www.makescienceeasy.com. It has absolutely everything that you need in order to pass and succeed in your science exams. So check us out, and if you want to sign up for our full courses that are going to help you get the best grades you can, then you can use the code MSE50 at the checkout and save 50% off all of our courses. So, I hope you're not too grossed out just yet. So let's move on and let's look at our next gross, disgusting science fact. And we're going to look at a plant because so far, well, it's all been about animals, but plants can be pretty gross too. And the plant we're going to look at is something called the Titan arum. And it's perhaps the grossest, most disgusting plant in nature. Yes, believe it or not, plants can be gross too. Now, despite looking like a rather magnificent and incredibly large flower, this plant has a very, very fitting nickname. It's called the corpse flower. Now, you can probably start to think why it might be called that already. But the reason is very simple. Because it smells like a dead, rotting body. Yes, this plant smells like a corpse. Now, when you think about plants and their flowers, they normally smell quite sweet, quite nice, and they do that to attract bees and other pollinators. And that's really quite useful because those pollinators are going to spread pollen and more flowers and plants can grow. Just what a plant needs. But the corpse flower doesn't want nice bees or butterflies to come along. No, it wants disgusting things like flesh flies and carrion beetles. And these are just great pollinators too. They do exactly the same job as a bee would. They can pollinate these plants, but they're attracted to the smell of the rotting flesh. So in order to attract these flesh flies and carrion beetles and all kinds of other nasty things that are going to want to eat dead animals, are going to want to lay their eggs in a dead animal. This plant releases a gross smell. And it's a mixture of stinky cheese, the smelliest cheese you can imagine, of garlic, of rotting fish, of sweaty stocks, and worst of all, of poop. Yeah, this plant smells grim. It is horrible. But these flesh flies and other such bugs love it. They absolutely love it. And they're attracted from all over, and it works perfectly for this plant. Now, amazingly, these plants only flower once every few years, which might be good for the noses of anyone who lives by them, because then they won't have to smell it so much. But believe it or not, because these flowers are so rare and they are so incredible, despite being some of the grossest things in nature, when they flower, people flock from all around to have a look at these plants and also to smell them. Hopefully they can hold on to their lunches when they do. Okay, Our next disgusting, gross, amazing fact. Elephants, well, they're pretty big animals. I'm sure you've all seen them before. And of course, big animals eat lots and lots of food. Got to be when you're big. And elephants like to eat lots of vegetation, nice things like that. The problem is they don't digest that much of it. It's really hard to digest. And what does that mean? Eat lots of food, don't digest lots of it. Big, big poops. Elephants do some of the biggest poops in the animal kingdom. In fact, every day a single elephant can produce about 150 kilograms of poop. That's about the same amount as two average sized people. Yep, the amount of poop that elephants produce every day is the same mass as two average people. Gross. On the other hand, elephant poop is a really, really good fertiliser. It's filled with loads of nutrients. And of course, if you've got fertiliser filled with loads of nutrients and there's lots of it, what are you going to do? Well, yeah, of course, you're going to use it as a fertiliser. So, you've got this wonderful fertiliser that you can use to grow fruit and vegetables that you eat. Yum. Okay, the last fact was pretty gross about poop, but I'm afraid this next fact is also poop related and it is so much worse. In fact, it might be the worst fact of all. So, if your stomach is starting to feel a little bit queasy, you might want to skip this fact. On the other hand, you don't really because it is so gross. And it's all about koalas and their poop. Now, koalas we like to think of are so cute and cuddly and such nice animals. But if you're a baby koala, a joey, maybe it's not that nice for you after all. Now, they start off their life and it's pretty good for any mammal. They drink milk for 6 months, nice and normal. And then it's time for them to be weaned onto solid food. Now, when you or I were babies and we were weaned onto solid food, our parents probably gave us some mashed up stuff that wasn't particularly appetizing, but it was alright. It was probably banana or something, so not too bad. With a koala, when they eat food, they need to eat eucalyptus leaves. Now, eucalyptus leaves are fairly toxic and they're fairly difficult to digest. In fact, despite being more or less the only food that a koala will eat, they don't have the correct bacteria in their digestive system to actually digest eucalyptus leaves. So if a baby koala tried eating them, they'd get no nutrition. No good. Well, that's where the mother comes in. She's oh so kind. She has an excellent delivery system for all those bacteria that this baby koala needs. The problem? It's in her poop. So, once a baby koala hits about 6 months old, the mother produces a special poop called pap. And the baby koalas eat this pap. And they'll eat it for a reasonable amount of time to build up those bacteria in their digestive system. Gross. Thankfully, once they've eaten enough of their mother's poop, they can then eat eucalyptus leaves. And while eucalyptus leaves aren't very appealing, I think it beats the alternative. Okay, so we're going to move on from the really, really gross stuff, just for now at least. And we're going to go and look at something that's a little bit less gross, but probably something that we're all guilty of at some point. And I'm talking about the 5-second rule. We should all know what it is, but if you don't, basically the 5-second rule is a little bit of a myth that says if you drop food on the floor, you can eat it as long as it's not been on the floor for more than 5 seconds. And the thinking is, if it's only been on the floor for 5 seconds, then all those bacteria and bits of dirt haven't got onto our food, and it's absolutely fine to eat. Now, the reality of this is very, very different. If you drop food on the floor, the moment you drop that food on the floor, it's going to be contaminated with dirt and bacteria, and eating it probably isn't the best for your health. That said, I still ate my sandwich and it was absolutely delicious. And so, very sadly, we come to the last of our gross science facts. And although this one isn't the grossest, I think it's pretty funny. In fact, it's probably the funniest of all these facts. And we're going to be looking at blue whales. Now, you might be aware that the blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived. It's bigger than any dinosaur, bigger than anything at all that's ever lived. So, we can tell it's going to eat a lot of food. Now, we already know from elephants that when you eat lots of food, lots comes out of you. But in the case of a blue whale, it's not a huge poop that comes out, although it probably does, but it's a huge fart. Now, you probably know, in fact, I know that you know, that if you're in the bath and you do a fart, a little bubble comes out and it's pretty stinky. But that bubble is underneath the water and it floats up to the top, and then you get that horrible waft in your face. Not good. Now just imagine what it's like when a blue whale, the biggest animal that's ever lived, does a fart. The fart bubble is absolutely huge. In fact, it's so large that a horse could fit inside of it. Now, don't ask me what a horse is doing in the middle of the ocean by a blue whale, because I haven't got an answer to that. But if there was one stupid enough to be there, it could fit inside the blue whale's fart bubble. But even worse, just imagine you're on a boat when it did it. You would not be having a good day. Pretty gross. Thank you so much for watching this video about 10 gross science facts. I really hope that you've enjoyed it, and more importantly, I hope you've learnt something that you can use to amaze all of your friends and perhaps gross out your science teacher at school. So, what was your favourite gross science fact? Or do you know any even grosser science facts? If you do, let us know in the comments below. And if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. Check out some of our educational content where you can learn and help you pass your science exams. And don't forget to check us out on www.makescienceeasy.com.